Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, spring football findings and the biggest storyline probably going under discussed as we look ahead to the fall.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And thanks as always for making us your first listen. Today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you. And on today's episode, we're going to be football heavy. And for the most part, even though we're going to talk about some of these pieces on the roster, we wrapped up a lot of that conversation, at least for the time being, on Monday's episode. So I actually want to get between the lines here with you today and talk some of the findings from spring football camp. I also want to get to what I think is still maybe the biggest storyline as we now look toward the fall, but possibly the makeup of this team actually is changing how big that storyline is. I'll explain it in just a moment. And then the headline, of course, as we get a look at these guys, and I think I'm hearing this from just about 10 out of 10 Red Raider fans I'm talking to since the spring collision went down. First off the bus, guys, we got them, and we got more than one, maybe even more than a handful. So we'll get to some of what was on display, a feast for the eyes as well. But some of the findings, Chris, I'd like to go over with you as far as what we saw on Saturday. And I don't want to extrapolate too much or overreact too much to what we saw in a situational kind of scrimmage that featured different types of settings and things that were being called for. But some things were out there that were very, very obvious, Chris. And I think one thing in particular that'll tie into all these conversations and subjects we'll hit on today's episode is what you have done physically with your defensive front is just something that really can't be ignored. And I know as far as speed and burst and quickness and quick twitch and football IQ, all these things that maybe you can't see or necessarily define all that easily, they're there too. But just outright taller, bigger, I'm going to assume stronger. I mean, I don't know what I expected when I'm looking at all these measurables and all these additions and announcements. But to see it on display was just kind of a different experience for this lifelong Red Raider. How about you?
Yeah, I think it's and you know, the fun part about this conversation, we talk about guys getting off the bus, is that there's a lot of young players on your team that don't necessarily just factor in heavily just yet. That would also be first off the bus guys. Which is a fun thought to have as you're trying to build a program, not just put a team together. Can we sustain this? But yeah, the biggest, the most noticeable to me is actually not a defensive line. That would be a 1B for me. But the most noticeable is your starting tackles on the offensive line. Enormous individuals.
I like hearing that.
And Samson and Jadis. And whether that Samson will stay at left tackle, I think, we'll see kind of what else sorts out. I mean, Jadis could actually stay at right tackle, move inside potentially, but he's going to play. But they are dudes, and these defensive line guys that you're talking about are dudes. And this is why, like, hey, because I was speaking at a deal on this past Friday, and somebody goes, "Who's your favorite portal guy, or who's the portal guy that you?" Which is a fun question to try to answer, and there's no right answer there, but the hardest part about it is who do you pinpoint? Like, who could have the most? Change the question however you want. Who will have the most impact? Who's your favorite? Who's the highest draft pick of the group? Who can you least afford to lose? And maybe we'll have those conversations as we go along in the off season. But I mean, I immediately went to Lee Hunter and Howard Sampson because they are the two biggest guys, and then they are, really, really good with a ton of upside and could be the like top draft picks. I mean, they check the most boxes maybe. But yeah, I think you're going to look different now up close. I mean, and I'm excited to, in a weird way, I'm really excited once the season starts to just get out there, and as the weeks start to roll by, how you look compared to the opposition, because you've always had some guys that look the part. I mean, I used to enjoy make you feel a little puffy chested out there when like Tyree Wilson would walk out there, and I'm watching the other coaches going, God dang, he that's pretty looking. I'm like, yes, it is. And he's got a double T on that jersey of his. Deal with it, and you will have to deal with it. Now you got a bunch, and your young people are look the part, and so yeah. I mean, there's no doubt that the size is kind of an in your face. Whoa, and it doesn't stop there. It's like we talk about basketball. Are you a big team or whatever? Well, that doesn't mean that you have a bunch of 6'10" guys. You can be a big team and be really big at guard. But like the correlation there is like you're really big in the secondary, and that's where you'll really notice like substantial length and size and depth, and you are noticeably big in the secondary. And that's like you had, what was it, Dunlap and
Rashad Williams.
Yeah, there you go. And they look they kind of like stuck out like a sore thumb. It was so big. I think these guys are better. I think there's more of them. But even then, you had a pretty good little defense when those guys were playing and they were motivated and all that. But now you've got 3 to 6 of them that look like that. So,
South Plains philosopher Joey McGuire, I believe, once said, "Mass kicks ass." If I'm getting it right, do you feel like I'm glad you bring up the thought of, hey, it's not just some of these new additions. You've still got some young guys that are kind of resembling some of these statuesque figures. And I was texting with the Matador Mobster yesterday. Braxton was asking about, in general, not just with these flashy portal additions, but the roster overall and recruiting efforts otherwise by Coach McGuire and his staff. Have they physically improved the roster? You think general from the first guy to the last guy? Would it be better off just from a physical or measurable stance now than prior to his arrival? Or do you think it's still kind of at maybe the top of the list? You've gotten a little bit better, but the depth or further down in the roster, you've got some work to do.
Well, it has, and that's by design. I think that there's certain things that, Coach Blanchard and like his personnel department, there's certain measurables that they feel very strongly about based on the past history of football being played at the Big 12 of the NFL, where like we want, that's why they're big on like, hurdle times. Can you dunk a basketball and all these different things that factor in, but arm length. And so it's not that they are going to turn somebody away per se, but if they have to break a tie, there's certain things that they're looking for that, hey, this translates, this mitigates risk, or it lessens the chances of a miss on a player. And that's really what you're trying to do. You can go out there and you got 25 scholarships and you're going to give 13 to offense, 12 to defense, or vice versa. You go out and try to go put a recruiting class together. It's a blank slate. You can get whatever you want, and you've got schemes and systems, but there's some certain, I don't want to say non-negotiables, but there's some certain things that they're going to prefer if they can go get them. And that's, there's the tricky part, but there's some guys that, but that's by design. And I do think you look different because you needed to get bigger. You just did. And as somebody told me after the bowl game ended, we are trying to, they've tossed out there, what would the Eagles do? That's kind of why they added David Bailey. What would the Eagles do? They'd add another defensive lineman and they'd win the Super Bowl based on just overwhelming the Chiefs' offensive line in front and all those things, as good as Pat Mahomes is. And I think that what would the SEC do is also appropriate, whether you like that or not. But that's what they're trying to do with their team. It needs to look same as or as close to and they saw it firsthand with a lot of Arkansas's backups. I'm like, how many guys were they missing? And they still look
right,
like pretty, and they were better than your backups, large in part, right? We saw this. They were faster, they're bigger, there's more of them, and all the deal. And so I think there's a conscious effort to try to go that route. And again, you can't necessarily There's no store you go shop at. I'm going to go to the SEC store and buy all my offensive and defensive linemen. That's not how it works. It's that Tariq Owens argument we were talking about several years ago. And my wife's like, well, wow, we don't have anybody that looks like Tariq Owens. Nobody else does either. So, anyway.
If you find that tree they're growing on,
yes, plant one.
Go shake it furiously. Speaking of the opposite of what we're just talking about, kicking game. I don't know about mass kicking ass there, but kicking is a part of that, so possibly. This is one of those things I guess I'm going to try my best not to overreact to, but wasn't a splendid culmination to the spring for the kickers. Coach McGuire actually commented afterwards saying, man, Ben nails basically throughout spring camp. So maybe just a bad day. I don't know, but now we got much to think about it and wonder what it means for the fall. First, today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Imagine watching your favorite team at the college basketball tournament live, feeling the energy of the crowd, witnessing unforgettable moments. We all know there's nothing like experiencing a big game in person, and getting tickets shouldn't be stressful. That's where Gametime comes in, making it easier than ever to grab last-minute seats at unbeatable prices. With Gametime Picks, curation makes it even easier to find better value for tickets to sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And the one and only lowest price guarantee, which means you get the lowest price or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Plus, peace of mind with seat views before you buy, no surprise fees, and the lowest price guarantee. You can book with total confidence. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, Locked On College, for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets at the lowest price, guaranteed.
It is a very under-discussed question for your team. There's a variety of questions with your team that I think have gone, under-discussed or man, I hadn't thought about it like that. But I just think, we'll get into a lot of that as we go. But as it relates to Saturday and your kicking game, you were 1 of 6, I think, on field goals, Upton Belafont and Stone Harrington. I'm not sure who made the one and who missed all 5 or how that worked out, but as a team, you were 1 of 6. Kenny Perry had talked recently that their percentages were in the lower 60s, and he had said, but one week they come out here and they made a 53-yarder and a 54-yarder, but then other times, he goes, the one that drives me crazy, and I would say the same, is like, when you're 35 yards in, have to have it. Like, we've got to have that 3 in our back pocket. Those are the ones that are going to frustrate. I'm not going to get frustrated if they miss a 50-yard plus. That's just sports. That's kicking. You did have Jack Burgess was not there this past Saturday. He's the normal holder. So Baron Morton was holding for a bit. You had some other folks, I think, holding a bit. I think Joe even joked, like, the holds are pretty good, but, kickers are used to their guy and a certain way of doing things, and just they're easily thrown off. I mean, haha. Like, he was kind of like, messing with the whole mentality of a kicker. Sure. But it's true. I mean, there's a certain thing, the way they do things. There's certain guys that they only practice with and all that. And the operation, as they would call it, it's a bit tricky. Anytime you mess with the holder or the snapper, it can every little bit, this throws you off. It was interesting to note, because Jack wasn't there, so Baron Morton also did some punting. I think right now he's your backup punter, I believe. I think Jason Llewellyn is potentially your starting deep snapper. Ryan Vagana may not, who was here strictly to deep snap out of California. It was kind of a highly thought of deep snapper. I think Llewellyn is maybe past him, but Llewellyn can also play tight end. And then Joey says to everybody, hey, we're going to go get a guy that's a combo guy that can punt and kick. I think that player would be like a walk-on. I don't think it would be in place of either any of your specialists that are currently on campus. However, I don't know. But I think you've been pretty lucky with what Gino has done and Trey Wolf has done in recent years, because you've been pretty solid there. All I want is somebody that can make the makeables, the ones that you got to have, or that you feel like, okay, we got 3 in our back pocket, so let's just go ahead and take it. You've got to make those. And Belafonte had a pretty good year at Buffalo last year, which is why he was sought after and why he came here and all that. I'm not going to choose to freak out just yet. But yeah, sorry to be long-winded there, but I think that is certainly worth discussing for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. Something else that I feel like obviously worth discussion. I don't know that it's been discussed enough, but as we look ahead to the fall, would I be wrong if I told you that the biggest storyline still, even among all these additions and all the excitement, is regarding your starting quarterback? Because I almost feel like it's Groundhog Day all over again. And I don't mean the decision of who that would be, but I'm talking about the health of Baron Morton and what that means, obviously, for 2025. But I've got a bit of an aside, I guess, to that question as well, Chris, because as I think about, prior years of going into a Texas Tech football season, if you got quarterback trouble, boy, you got big trouble in a lot of those years because you're going to have to outscore everybody. And that seems very simple for someone because clearly it does take more points 10 times out of 10 to win a game. But you know what I'm saying? It's going to have to be led by some explosive offensive effort to have any chance week to week. And clearly if the quarterback is not at his best, that's going to be tough to do. So I'm kind of conditioned to viewing things that way, which does lead me to kind of think, yeah, Baron Morton's still the biggest story for this team or storyline for this team heading into the fall. But I'm daring to dream a little bit also that maybe given the makeup of your team elsewhere, defensively speaking, and some of what you could do with your offensive line or a ground game, maybe that takes a little pressure off of that being such a crucial position. I don't know. As I say it, it sounds kind of pie in the sky, but tell me what you think about that storyline in general and what I'm saying about the makeup of this team compared to so many years that have gone by where it's been a lot different.
And I think it's also interesting to note that, Will Hammond and Mitch Griffiths didn't exactly light it up on Saturday in front of the fans. There was some errant throws, there's some underthrows, overthrows, and things like that. Because I got a note from somebody after Saturday happened, and it was like, man, our quarterbacks, really, really struggled. And I'm like, well, okay, if that's your takeaway, but to your point, Cowan, this defense has a lot to do with that. It also is worth noting that your quarterbacks are going to struggle when there's no Reggie Virgil, there's no Caleb Douglas, there's no Coy Aiken, and some of your offensive linemen that maybe would be playing or plan on playing in the fall and all that stuff. So you just have to understand the context of everything. But I would agree in that I guess I go into this thing without everything being put together just yet, because we don't all know who's going to be added or who's going to leave. I think it's pretty clear that as the spring went along, the offense was probably the winner of the first scrimmage, and the defense was probably the winner of the second two, if you want to call this past Saturday a scrimmage. They kind of, at times, they look like they kind of overwhelmed the offense, but I think that has more to do with your defense and the fact that your starting quarterback is out. All three wide receivers are out, and some other pieces are being held out. Because I'm watching some of these errant throws, which that's not wrong, but there's not anybody open. That's not a problem. Anytime your teams play against each other or practice against each other, if there's a good, there's going to be a bad. I mean, that's just kind of how it goes.
Yep.
And people have always you've been trained around here to be rooting for offense, and this is the brand, but your defense is going to be in a position to win you many games. And I do think, to your point, Cowan, that it does or should take some of the pressure off of your offense and the quarterback. It doesn't mean you're not going to try to score 35 points a game. It's not what I'm saying. Right. But maybe in games, maybe you do elect to punt on purpose. Go, you know what? I'm sending those boys back out there because these folks over here have no answer for what we're trotting out there on defense. And that, because there's two things that are true. At some point this next season, if you win a Big 12 championship, your quarterback is going to have to go win you a game. He's going to have to go make a play. Your kicker is going to have to make a kick, whether it's midway through the third quarter or with no time left on the clock. There's going to come a point where it's like there's a kick and he's going to have to make it. Okay, but what what we've never been able to say.
First, today's episode brought to you by PrizePicks. Testing your skills on PrizePicks this football season is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports and the best way to spice up any game, anytime. You think you got what it takes to win up to 100 times your money? All you got to do is select 2 to 6 players, pick more or less on their projected stats, place your entry, and boom, you're ready to roll. PrizePicks is not only the best way to get action on sports in most states, including Texas, but PrizePicks also puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When the picks hit, you can get your money in as quick as 15 minutes. With easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and a giant selection of players, projections, and stat categories, it's no surprise that PrizePicks is the #1 daily fantasy sports app. So get in on the fun and the winning and download the PrizePicks app today and use our code LOCKEDONCollege, and you're going to get $50 instantly when you play only $5. Again, that's our code LOCKEDONCollege on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you just play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. With PrizePicks, run your game.
There's going to come a point, and maybe many of them, where that defense is going to win you a game or three. Like without you doing a whole lot else, that defense will go out there and they'll take the ball away. They will just stonewall the other team, or they will be just a lot better and increase your margin for error. So I don't disagree with that, because I think a lot of what's going on in the spring is your defense just happens to be really good and deep and athletic, and I think they've picked things up pretty quickly. And so as we start talking about the beginning of the season, I expect that group for the most part to be pretty good at the start, and I think offense may be a bit slower to come along, just because of the Baron Morton, if anything, and because you don't know. I can't hand it to Taj to bail me out. Who is this person? But we'll talk about that as we go. But I think your point's a valid one.
And I'm not trying to act at all like you can just have a warm body at quarterback and
No.
try to compete for a Big 12 championship. Absolutely not. But I just wonder if the dynamic may be a little bit different as far as how much I, as a fan, or other fans, are invested in, like, God, we've got to get this quarterback healthy 10 of 10. He's got to be out there every week feeling good to have any chance. I don't feel that way any longer. Of course, these are still conversations based mostly or almost entirely on paper. So we'll see what happens when the rubber actually meets the road. But I still do think that this Baron Morton storyline is probably one that's gotten somehow, some way, and I suppose it's just because of the exciting portal additions, but has somehow not gotten enough attention, because for the most part, you're kind of right back where you were a season ago, wondering what it's going to look like. But we'll see. And not that it looked, bad last year, obviously. Some good, some bad, some ups, some downs. But I think the thing that I'm really just hoping to avoid, Chris, is getting back into those conversations we've had a couple of times over the last couple of seasons, in that you feel like, man, your offensive playbook is like limited, I guess, in this way, because X quarterback just can't make these throws with the shape that his AC joint is in, or whatever it might be. He's out there, he's giving it all you got, but is just limited from week to week. So whether or not we can get out of that this fall, I don't know. Time will tell, but I still feel like that is the thing that, beyond all the shiny, flashy, and very, very large new toys, has probably deserving the most attention as we get ready for the fall. All right, man, appreciate the time as always, Chris. Enjoyed the conversation, and we are back for more on the other side. We're going to be back, I know, to roster building conversations this week as pieces are still moving. We got windows closing, we got windows remaining open, but soon to close. So the pressure, the urgency is obviously still there. So we'll wait and see what is to come. Looking forward to it all, man. We'll see you for the next one.
Sounds good. Yeah. And you remain under construction to a certain extent. So I'm it's like, what's our team look like? Well, we just don't quite know yet in either case. And Baron, get healthy, brother. You are missed. We'd like you back in uniform in a red jersey ASAP, please, sir. So we'll see what we get. But thanks for everybody for tuning in, and we'll talk to everybody next time and see what has transpired then.
There we go. Get subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode. Appreciate the everydayers for always being out there. If you are one, you've heard that before, and so you're appreciated. But I'll tell you once again, thank you for being there, and thank you to the Matador Mob as well. Hit the show notes and find a link to a free 14-day trial if you're interested in joining that crew. That's your direct line to Chris and myself. with one-on-one text sent straight to your phone. For Chris, I'm Casey. Thanks as always for the time, and we hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.